Well, first of all, welcome everyone to the second of these exciting ASRC-supported Young Lives Methods workshops. And I'm just very briefly, we're all really familiar with Young Lives, but it really on reflecting on Young Lives as a research project, it has been groundbreaking, I think, in four really significant ways. The first is in its intellectual leadership and its research excellence, and that can be seen by the 400 papers published, astonishing, over the last 15 years. The second has been in its real commitment to combining methods, to quantitative and qualitative methods, and that those have had the opportunity to inform each other over a long period of time. The third has been in its commitment to policy engagement and impact, and to sustaining that in the four countries in which Young Lives has worked, but also regionally. And perhaps the last is perhaps what makes Young Lives the most unusual, and that is its generosity as a research project. It is very rare to find a large project that releases all of its data open access, and that really does it, rather than half does it. And this really is what I think makes Young Lives stand out. In this way, it's truly an altruistic research project. But they're also showing great generosity in sharing not only the data, but also some of the challenges and solutions of doing this kind of research over long periods of time in low and middle income countries. And this workshop is an example of that generosity. And we really look forward to finding out more about the exciting state case study of Peru. We've got two speakers. We've got Dr. Mary Penny, who is a British physician, originally trained at Girton College in a university which we shall not speak the name of, not so far from here. And she worked as a doctor in the NHS before being awarded a Wellcome Trust scholarship to study in Peru. When I talked to Mary, we identified that Mary is a Young Lives teenager, because she has been involved in the project for 19 and possibly 20 years now, and has a real in-depth understanding of the engagement and Young Lives within Peru and leadership within that. Alan is a Young Lives child, having been involved for a mere 8 years in the project. He's PI for Young Lives Peru and a senior researcher at Grade. He's an economist by background, both in Oxford, the university to which we shall name, and in Peru, and really interested in looking at social programs and skills formation. So we're really excited to hear from both of them. What we'll do is we'll hold your questions until the end, but then we're wanting an excited and engaged discussion. So don't be too polite. Over to Mary and Alan.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to discuss really, the experience that we have been accumulating over the years. Very honored also to do this with Mary. She's actually one of the founders of the study. As Lucy was saying, I joined only in 2012, a long time ago, but I realized that it has been a big opportunity for me also to be part of a team that already knew how to do this process, and I have been trying to help since then. So yeah, I know that some of you already know a lot about the Young Lives study, but I just wanted to, Mary and I just wanted to put some ideas and thoughts that we have about our experience with the study. First, to give you a brief description of what we do. As you know, the Young Lives study has been tracking 2 birth cohorts over 15 years in 4 developing countries, Ethiopia, India, Peru, and Vietnam. Overall, the study as a whole has had the objective of understanding the causes and consequences of childhood poverty. So this is a study that's been done in 4 countries, but today in particular we're going to be talking about what we do in Peru. However, I should mention that most of the design is shared with the other countries, although in some cases it's specific to Peru. I will try to highlight when that is the case. In the case of Peru, we are tracking two cohorts. The younger cohort, which is the one that we track since they were age 1 approximately, and that we started tracking that cohort in 2002. This is about 2,000 children, and the last time we visited them, they were 15. And then we have the older cohort, which is smaller. It's composed by an original sample of 700 children that we started tracking at the age of 8 years, and they had 22 years the last time we visited them. And both cohorts, I mean, the design is such that actually both cohorts are random samples from the same communities. And we chose 20 clusters at random using the map of poverty from Peru from 2001. It's not actually nationally representative. I mean, the idea was for the sample to be pro-poor, so the richest 5% was excluded from the universe, and then for the remainder, we randomly sampled 20 clusters, and then within each cluster, we randomly sample a point to start the search for households. So that's what happened in round 1. And since then, we have visited these two cohorts in 4 occasions, in 2006, 2009, 2013, and 2016. We expect to continue. And over it's been 15 years now, so obviously we have lost part of the sample. I'm giving you some numbers there, and I'll get back to the point of attrition, which has been relatively low for this type of study. This diagram shows much better the design of the study. So in the first row, you can see the older cohort, the ages, starting from age 8 all the way to age 22. And then the second row is the younger cohort, starting from age 1 all the way to age 15. And something interesting that is not random is that you can see that the ages are comparable. So you can compare the younger cohort at age 8 with the older cohort, the same age, but with data that was collected 7 years before. So this has been actually very useful for us to engage in conversations with policymakers in Peru, because we can actually say something about what's improving or not for children in Peru. But also, I mean, I'm talking about the quantitative side of the study, but in parallel, we started in 2007 a qualitative study that is composed of a nested sample within each cohort, a small sample. And for this sample of children, we have we collected information through interviews and focus groups with a small group of the Young Life children. We did this starting in 2007, and the last round was in 2014. And the good thing is that we have an interdisciplinary team. So I'm an economist, but we also have an educational psychologist as part of the team. We have anthropologists and sociologists working with us. So we've been dividing the work, but trying to think carefully that this study as a whole is just one, but it has these two components: the quantitative side and the qualitative side. This is just an example of how the original sample was distributed. I said the original sample because of migration is no longer where the sample is located, but you can see 20 red dots in the map. Those are the 20 districts that were randomly sampled in round 1. And in particular, you can see that there are 3 red dots in Lima, and because Lima concentrates 1/3 of the population, they had a higher chance to be selected by a random method. So originally, we had to go to these 20 clusters located, which basically is the same as to say we had to go to 20 districts in 12 regions in the country. But in the last visit, although I don't have a map to show you, but I can tell you that we had to visit more than 200 districts in the 24 regions. So the rate of internal migration is very high in Peru. And this has been one of the challenges that for us to keep up with that. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Also wanted to mention something about the instruments that we use. In this case, I'm going to focus on the quantitative survey because I am in charge specifically of that component with Mary. So we have a household questionnaire, which we've done since the beginning, and it's the caregiver of the child that typically answers the questions. We also collected the anthropometry for the children, for like basically what we call the index children, that child that was selected within the household. Since the age of 5, we also collect cognitive achievement information through in that first visit we used the Peabody Picture vocabulary test, and then after that we started introducing other tests to measure reading comprehension and mathematics. Since the age of 8, there is also an individual questionnaire. It used to be a child specific, but now they're adults, so we can no longer call them children. And we used that instrument to collect information about many aspects. I mean, it was mainly about the school and the school life at the beginning, and aspects of especially socio-emotional dimensions. Then, and also an education history. So we have tried to keep education history about each year what they were doing, and eventually. Even since the beginning, we have also been collecting information about child work, and then eventually about just work, because they are now adults, especially in the older cohort. We also have the self-administered questionnaire, which was introduced first for the older cohort because of the age, and we use it for the first time in the last visit to a younger cohort. And we use that instrument to measure aspects related to risky behaviors, sexual behaviors, knowledge of sexual information. There are some questions about experiences of violence as well. And we also have a community questionnaire, which is basically something that we collect to learn more about the districts. So those are the components of the quantitative survey. One thing I wanted to highlight is related to the attrition rates of the Young Life study. So it's relatively low. What I am doing in this graph is to compare the Young Life's cohorts with other longitudinal studies that are similar in that they have been following cohorts since birth for a very long time. There might be other studies, but these are those that are closest in design to our study. And what you can see in the red bars, one of those is the Peru sample. So we actually have a higher attrition rate than some of the other Young Life countries, but overall is much smaller compared to other studies. That's for the younger cohort, the red bars, and the green bars show you similar information for the other cohort. So these are annualized attrition rates. So it means, like, for instance, every year we lose 1% of a sample. So if by 15 years we've lost 15% approximately. But that's lower than what we actually may have expected. And what we want to talk a little bit about on this occasion is what we have been doing to keep attrition low. So there's been a number of strategies. First we have what I call the main strategies, what you will expect that is there by design to reduce attrition. One thing we do is we do a tracking of the whole sample 1 year before each round. Basically it's a physical visit that we do to the families to make sure that they are still there, but if they moved, we combine that with the contact information we have from these families, but also even sometimes from their neighbors, to contact them. So we want to know where they have moved, and we go. Our goal is to look for them across the country, no matter where they are within the national borders. for international migration, there's nothing we can do about it other than to verify that they actually went abroad. And so that's, one key part of the strategy for me has been to do this tracking exercise and to collect this contact information. But we also do a number of other things that we think have contributed to keep the attrition low. But I want to give the opportunity now to Mary to explain to us what these other strategies have been.
We've had a series of different activities that are designed to make sure that we know where people are and keep contact with them and that they feel they belong. And they do actually feel they belong. It's when you go and visit them, they say, soy niño del milenio. So there is a sort of, we have managed to create a sort of feeling that you belong to something by going back to, that's probably not on the list actually, but we have in the Nutrition Institute, we have a very active ethics committee, which is approved by the government. Peru has quite well developed actually ethics committees, and it has to go through there's a government agency which approves them, and the ethics committee takes their life very seriously and takes their work very seriously. And so we have to have a form which is registered with this ethics committee and also give them reports. We've also been very lucky in that we've been able to have some of the same experienced field workers who've worked in other projects, visiting houses, and not necessarily like Young Lives. And despite the fact that it's like work every 4 years or so, we've been able to always have at least half the people have been people who've been involved before, and that's very helpful. So that when you go back to the community, you've sort of been known. And I think that is a very important thing, because there's a lot of crime in Peru, and so people are sort of a little bit more confident that this is somebody that they've, at least some of the group they've known before, so that's been very helpful, having same field workers and key staff. That in particular, for instance, it's really important. There's a number of ethical cases, there's a number of problematic cases. And it's important that when the field worker knocks on the door, they don't ask for, the father, if the father left, or so there's a certain amount of, so we're able to be quite, what word is, but be quite careful about not putting our foot in it when we go back to the house, because you've collected all this information, so people assume that you can remember what they told you the time before, which of course you can't. There's 2,000 of them, but at least you know that this particular household had some tragedy or something like that. So it's possible, and that's very helpful. There's two things that are helpful for that: the retention of the field workers and the prior knowledge of these ethical cases, which allow us tactics. Word I was looking for. We also have to work. You can't just march into a community in Peru. You normally have to have some kind of entrance through the local authorities, or at least be known what you're up to. And that's where, of course, having being registered and having had the ethical committee helps. Otherwise, somebody come up to you and ask you, what are you doing here? particularly, it's perhaps a little bit less now, but particularly in a period in which we had much more problems with Sendero and Minolsa and various. And so we also present to district authorities and let them know what we're doing and generally get their help. And we also get some information from them, because they also participate in the survey of the community now. It's also quite useful because there are other NGOs. There's CARE and there's UNICEF and there's other different people working in Peru. So it's also, it's useful that they also know who we are. So we're not competing with them, because, NGOs can be competing with each other. And so it's sort of, we maintain good relations with the other NGOs. We're not doing the same thing as they are, not competing with them. We have, then of course, families do expect something back. They're given all this information. It takes quite a long time. It can be up to we maybe do it in 2 hours, but it's more often 4 hours, and you're sitting there in the household and everybody else is looking and thinking, what are they up to over there, sort of thing. So we give different information. We give some nutritional advice, and we try not to, if we give sort of general, we don't give particularly specific advice, because we're not trying to, we're trying to be the balance between being ethical and obviously not letting somebody starve, and on the other hand, changing the lives of these children. So we sort of try and seek a balance between these things. Obviously, if we do find things that are absolutely urgent, we do give them advice to go to the doctor or whatever. So we have, so we give them the results, for instance, of the heights and weights, and the results of the anthropometry, and we've now got a sort of consultation guide, which is just this. We haven't done that before. This is this round. Is a
time.
Have we?
Since round 2 at least.
Oh, okay. So don't go for that. It's a particularly nice one this time, in that case, I should say. I've forgotten the others. but this tells you where you can get help from. We didn't have such a nice one before. This is sort of like a booklet.
It has improved.
It has improved. Anyway, so we give them advice where they can get help for different things, and so there is something that we give back. And the other thing which has been very popular is that we take a photo of the child and the mother, and we take sort of a couple of photos, and then we give the photos back to the family, or at least we select one of them and give them back to the family. And if you go back into the houses, sometimes they have a row of their young lives photos, and I think that was a very good move, because I can't remember whose idea it was, but it was a good move, because that has been very popular, because not everybody can afford to or gets around to having photos taken of their children at different ages, and so I think that was a very good idea. We don't pay. We might give a small gift to the children, at least varied each round, but we don't actually pay them for this, because we think that would be, I don't think the ethics committee actually would allow us to do that. Not in this context, they do allow in some contexts. So I think those are the main strategies, and I have to say, I work in different studies, but this is terribly satisfactory, because on the whole, not 100%, but on the whole, people are quite pleased to see us again, despite the, but I think one of the things that perhaps we haven't mentioned here in the maintenance strategy is that I think people feel kind of like important. I mean, they do feel that they're contributing to their what they've told us is being taken into account, because Young Lives has been absolutely unbelievable in terms of the production of materials and the papers that have come out, so if they look it up, I mean, probably people now look it up on the internet. I'm not sure, but I haven't heard that. I think they do, and so I think they feel they belong to the soy un niño de milenio. Sort of, there is that feeling of belonging that I think is also quite helpful in the. I mean, not everything. Some people, oh my God, not another 2 hours, and don't agree. But I think the attrition has been incredibly low, really, considering that we do ask quite a lot of them. But I also think that I have to say that I think in Peru families are very tolerant and they're traditionally rather polite. So that helps us. When I've said that we've established a relation with the family, I think I've gone through this without forgetting I've got the slide. So the way that we go back makes them feel important. The field workers are also, I have to say, very flexible. I mean, if they have to go on a Sunday, if they have to go at 11 o'clock at night, or if they have to go at 6 o'clock in the morning, what do they do? They do, and they have to be there accompanied by someone, but there's a lot of emphasis on whatever it takes. We will try and get this interview done at the time that's convenient for the family. The other thing is I think that we do ask about things which families consider important. So this is not a survey about something that's utterly unknown or different to them. We're asking questions that they also consider are important in their lives. So we have, Alan has mentioned the self-administered questionnaire, which the child goes off and sits in a corner and fills in without anybody else looking. And I think that's been very interesting in a way, and that's been increasingly so as the children get older. I never worked in a project which has produced so many publications and presentations, nationally and internationally. And I think Joe and started with the London School of Hygiene actually, and then changed to Oxford. And I think all the people who've been involved from all the rounds have been incredible in terms of getting the information out there. And I think you go back to I think that really fundamentally, not all of them by all means. I mean, some people are a bit reluctant and you have to come back at different times, and maybe but they don't have very many people who actually refuse. We have more people, I think, who are lost because we can't find them, or they've migrated and things like that. But I think they do feel, that they're kind of contributing and that they're somebody special because they're in the young lives. Anyway, so I think that's what we've learned from, well, certainly what I've learned from doing this longitudinal study. It's incredibly nice study to be involved in as well, I have to say.
Really do. This really is now open for questions and thoughts and comments and discussion. I have a first one about the photographs.
Yeah.
A brilliant idea and a lovely idea you can see for the families. I wonder whether they might also have a use in working out that you've got the right person, the right child. You use them for identification purposes as well.
When I joined, we were already using this strategy, but we use it especially in the first couple of rounds, in the second round, because Peru has improved a lot in the last few years, but in many cases it's not that the house has a number outside, so we know the street, and then with once we are in the community, we know the name of the street. With the picture is very useful to find the house, and also to make sure that we're looking for the same child. But I would say that over time, that has become less important. And what has become really important is the fact that the children are actually expecting the picture. I mean, in fact, they sometimes has contacted us over time, saying, I lost the photo that you took in round one. It's the only photo I have with my grandmother. So can you send me a copy?
Questions from them?
I think it's really important and interesting to also reflect on the changes that you've experienced over the course. I mean, I don't know if the changes have been so dramatic in Peru as they have in the other countries, but the rise of internet use, mobile phones, and I know you've talked in the past about the use of Facebook to be in touch with the children and so on. I think it'd be really good to reflect on that, but also what the introduction of handheld computers has meant, because when Young Lives started, it was all done with paper questionnaires.
So indeed, we introduced tablets officially for the full sample in our fourth visit in 2013, but in 2009, the third round, we already introduced them. But I mean, this was before I joined, but the main point was that we were not sure about the implications of introducing this technology, and in particular, what's going to be the impact on the answers when you move from a paper-based questionnaire to a tablet-based. But basically, what we always try to do is to keep the methodology constant over time, so that we don't lose comparability. So taking this concern into consideration, the Peru team, with help from our colleagues from Oxford, came up with a design. So the PI in charge back then, Javier Escobar, worked on the idea of randomizing so that half of the interviews were done with a tablet and the other half with a paper-based questionnaire. Actually, there is a published paper with the results. Some of the main conclusions are that the overall quality has not been affected of the information, but it's faster. it's faster to have to run an interview with a tablet. There might be a little bit of a loss in terms of the information when the questions have many items, but actually that works better with the computer, because with the computer you can like block very quickly certain items when you know that the pattern is that the person is answering no. It's easier to block things with the tablet. So overall, I think there has been an improvement in terms of the quality of information that we collect. And then in round 4, as a consequence of this, we introduced the use of tablets for the full sample. And we had 2 challenges there, I think. One was that some of our enumerators, which are very good, they didn't know how to handle properly a tablet, especially a touchscreen tablet, because you need a touchscreen tablet to do this quickly in the field. So we spent some time actually, eventually they got there. I have to be honest, by 2013, I myself had not used a touchscreen at that very moment. And the same with our enumerators. We spent some 2 additional weeks probably of training just to make sure that we were all, at the same level. Maybe actually we probably might have lost a couple of enumerators just for that reason, because they never got used to the tablet, to be honest. And another concern also had to do with security once we were in the field. This, especially in round 4, nowadays tablets are very, very cheap. They were not that cheap in 2013, especially given that we had to run a software there. So actually, we went to the field in Peru with tablets that cost $800 back then. That's a lot of money for a tablet. We were concerned about security. We actually lost 1 tablet in the first week of the field work, which made us very concerned. But luckily, it was the only tablet we lost. We got stolen, to be honest, and it was because actually there had been a breach in the protocol. Because in part because of that, we made the protocols very tight, so that if you have an interview at 9 in the evening, you need to tell us when you're done, so that we send a taxi or our driver to pick you up. You shouldn't go by yourself with the tablet. But these are protocols that we already had, but they became important not only now for our enumerators security, but also for the equipment. There was also another protocol. Obviously, the important thing was the numerator. Like if someone comes with a gun and tries to take the tablet, obviously you give the tablet. But we were also concerned about the information. So we had this protocol that once you complete an interview in the household, before you leave the household, you save everything in your USB and you put it in your pocket. So that in case for some reason you lose, either because you get stolen or simply for other reason you lose a tablet, we still keep that information. Something very interesting that happened in round 4, that we were only allowed to do it because we introduced the tablets, is that for the first time we introduced a tablet-based test to measure executive functions.
Oh, yeah.
So this was a very interesting experience because, for many reasons, one of the reasons is that actually some of the children had not used a tablet before. So we had a big pilot to make sure that it was going to actually work. I'm talking about a few years now. So nowadays, things have improved in Peru. There's been a lot of migration to urban areas. So maybe the portion of the sample that has not used a tablet, obviously they have used a tablet already because we asked them to use them. But in their general life, I think now they have much more access to computers, to internet, to smartphones. We have had to adapt our questionnaires, sometimes adding a question about use of social networks. But that's one of the. I think part of the challenge is also to keep the questionnaire updated to the changes in the technology.
The other challenge is to keep it as short as possible because there's always a lot of other things you'd like to ask. And it's already long. It's long because obviously there's parts that we need to repeat. We want to repeat annually, and between that and the sort of new information, it is a long interview. It's a long interview, but but we have to be careful not to make it even longer. It's a challenge, that is.
Great. So we'll take you first, and then
I just had something to follow up on that, switching from paper to computer-based survey. In terms of the paper, do you save those, the earlier hard copy surveys?
Well,
We do.
we store them for a few years, but after a given time we have to not shred them, right? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because in terms of what might get lost when you make that change, I know some studies in the UK, qualitative studies, have looked at marginalia in surveys. So the sort of the paradata, the kind of writing in the margins that field workers might do about a particular household or child, that doesn't really get factored into the data that's entered. But that's another sort of maybe context data that may or may not.
Well, there's another advantage actually too, and that's because I remember I was rung up by somebody from way off somewhere, off Pure or something like that, and they were in some there's a problem of litigation, or there was something that was really important to know with the child. They were now adolescent, but when they were born and what their name was and what their father's name was, and we went back. We did still have the paperwork. And so I went back and found their agreement form, when they agreed to participate in the project, and was able to scan that and send it off to them for. I think it worked actually. so sometimes there's an advantage, an unexpected advantage.
Yeah.
But they were going to lose something really important. What it was.
And if I just to add to Mary's point, even though it's true that we have to destroy the physical copies of the questionnaires after a few years, but we have digital copies, not of everything, but of the key things that are protected in a server that belongs to a project.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. Just wondering if you have any reflection or feedback from the families who took part in this study, how their involvement in the study had affect their lives. And you have, Mary mentioned a very interesting point that many of the families, or maybe their parents, said that they feel important, they feel special, they feel that they contribute to the study. And as a social worker, I see this as an act of empowerment for these vulnerable families and persons. So I would like to listen if you have any reflections.
Well, I think that's a very good point, actually. I mean, it is difficult to know whether we do have an impact on the family. I mean, I don't know that we really sort of empower them greatly, but we haven't been able to measure that, obviously, because we don't have a control.
Yeah.
But it's a good point. I think because it's only once every 4 years, and there's a lot of other surveys going on. I mean, Peru has a number of national surveys and things, so it's not. This is a bit more in depth and a rather slightly sort of more. It's a rather different survey, but it's still, sort of happening. But it's a good point, and it's difficult to measure. But I think we probably don't. It's difficult to say because we don't have a control.
We did put in an ESRC application to do that, to create, a match sample in Peru of the younger cohort, and to look at their outcomes compared to those who've been in the study. Unfortunately, it wasn't funded this round.
Yeah, exactly.
But that question is key, and it comes up again and again.
Yeah. But it's also important to highlight that we do have other concerns, the exact opposite actually, which is because we're only selecting one child in each household, and we have actually, through the qualitative research, people have indicated that they think that child was selected for some particular reason. We actually worry about the possibility that child may be favoured in some way within the household. There may be more investment in that child as compared to the others. We've no way of knowing, but we've just got little anecdotes, little comments, little questions that have made us think, gosh, is that an implication? We've actually created some kind of inequality within the household. I hope to goodness it's not true, but we really don't know. I think the learning, though, is that research is always an intervention. And I remember Young Lives was evaluated with ESRC funding some years ago by a group of statisticians. And they actually talked about the contamination of survey data by doing qualitative research, because you develop more intense relationships with qualitative research. And they were really worried that doing the qualitative research would actually have a negative impact on the survey data. So there are lots of ways in which we would love to be able to understand those dynamics better. The funding would be needed, though, to do it. As you say, Mary, we absolutely would need a control and to do it properly.
Bless those statisticians. You could argue the opposite direction as well, couldn't you?
But,
or that it improved the survey results.
You could argue this.
I mean, maybe just to add to this. No, I mean, we might be in disagreement with Mary about this. I do think we must have some type of impact. As Joe was pointing out, obviously there is no such a thing as just a purely observational design. I mean, you are there, you're obviously something new or unique. They know that we're coming again every 3 years. They might feel particularly special because they are the niños del milenio, the young life child in Spanish. In particular, we have this consultation guide, which provides access to information that is publicly available, but that some of the families might not have the resources to actually get this information because of the inefficiency of the government. So we are providing information that might be useful for them, and that alone might have an impact. Then there is a question about what we ask about. For instance, we have a question about educational aspirations. So we've been asking for many years to this group of participants, if you didn't have any constraint in life, what is the highest level of education you would like to achieve? Probably no one has asked this question before to them. So that you surely must be reflecting to, maybe I should aspire for more. So we thought about this idea, and we think there might be something about us having an impact. The interesting thing is that our sample is a random sample, and that actually allows us to think about different ideas in which we could actually construct a control sample. One idea would be to obtain a new random sample from the original universe, or do some kind of matching with communities that are nearby. The large challenge there is how to deal with the migration, because we will need to go to these communities that are similar or are located closely to the original communities, and we will need to look not only for adolescents that have the same age as our cohort has now, but we will need to search for those adolescents that were born there but are migrated. We think this is feasible, but it's very expensive. And it reminds us a very important question to us: if we have an impact, we would like to have an answer then about this in the future.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful presentation, and congratulations on all the decades now of work you have done. I was just curious about the design of the younger and older cohorts, and the point you mentioned about the possibility of, for example, comparing an 8-year-old in the younger cohort or in the first cohort with somebody who ages into the same group in the later cohort, or maybe not 8, but an older age, 12-year-old, and kind of how you think about this. And I guess, whether you're thinking, or perhaps you already have done this, being able to attribute the effect of certain macro level changes. And I guess also, if we think about, if we do believe that the measurement affects either how people respond or in fact their experiences or both, whether there might be how you think about comparing somebody who's doing the survey for the first time, for example, to somebody who's doing a few times already. And there's probably already hundreds of papers you've published on this, so sorry, that's for my ignorance.
So what we have, the main use we have made to this component of our design has been especially useful in our relationship with the policymakers, because they are always interested in trying to understand what has changed over time in Peru for children and adolescents. So because of this design, we can say, a child that has the age of 15 now, if you compare them with children the same age but 7 years ago, you can see certain things that have improved. In the case of Peru, stunting has reduced considerably. The years of education attained has also improved considerably. Cognitive achievement has improved, but slowly, maybe not enough. We can say this with the data. So this is why it's particularly useful for us. And also, as you were saying, for studies, for analysis, it can become an obvious control group. That maybe not that maybe it's not that the one group is not affected, but they are affected at a different age, so that you can actually do analysis with this. There's been some studies, but actually that's the nice thing about the project, as you were mentioning, Lucy, that is public available data. So this can be done, even if it has not been done by us yet.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about the inter-cohort comparison was this was one of the ways in which we discovered the pace of increase of rates of obesity in adolescence, wasn't it, Mary, in the paper that we did, whereby the younger cohort, as they were in adolescence, were the rates of obesity were much higher than they had been for the older cohort at the same ages. And this is really opened up a whole new area of research, because it's obviously becoming such an important consideration in so many countries where historically the research was always focused on undernutrition and stunting and so on, and now we're seeing this dramatic shift, and particularly that shift in that adolescence, which again I think takes the whole framing of the understanding of human development into a different age group, where so much of it historically was thought to be about early childhood. We're now looking at, with that inter-cohort analysis, we can really see what's happening in adolescence that we should be concerned about as a sort of second period of major change in human development, a major sort of transition point.
Yeah, I think we've also been able to contribute to with intermittent, without any intervention, to be able to see that some children too were not necessarily condemned to be short all their lives, but actually were able to catch up a little bit later on, which was not kind of like sort of believed that everything happened. Everything happened in the first 3 years of life determined how tall you'll be in the end. And but there is it's not surprising really, but there is a bit more flexibility later that we were able to show.
Hi, Will Rugard with UC Kluge's Young Lives team. I've got a couple of questions. So you spoke a little bit about attrition. So age came up in there. But were there any other factors? And at any point were you also able to sort of ask other household members why one of the participants had migrated, and sort of treat it as an outcome? Because in some circumstances you might think of it as actually something that was beneficial for the child, and at a certain point as kind of a labour opportunity in a different country or something like that. Also, I don't actually know the origins of the Young Lives study, so I don't know whether you got funding for all of the 15 years of follow-up at the beginning. And did you at any point consider sort of increasing your sample size at a given point to study certain rare outcomes that sort of became more interesting, or policymakers started to sort of really kind of become interested in? So
maybe you want to talk first about the origins of the study, and I can follow up on the attrition issues.
Yeah, I mean the study of who funded it originally? It was DFID funded it originally, and we have moved into different funders and moved in and out of different funders at different times. Yeah, I mean, and it also was started at London School of Hygiene, as I mentioned, and then it's reviewed, and for various reasons, Oxford took over. the same institutions, I think, in the countries. We've all been in right from the beginning, haven't we? Yeah. What was the other?
In terms of, did you ever sort of think about increasing the sample size? So you've got the 2 cohorts, but
Yeah.
sometimes studies sort of halfway through, when 15 years is such a long time, you could have thought about saying, okay, well, we want to bring in another N number of young people at this certain age that are matched with this cohort. And then
To see whether we to look at whether we might have had an impact on those.
Or even just to incorporate them and use the same questionnaire in those participants, but you sort of just have more people in your study.
Yeah, well, the answer is no. we haven't. We haven't ever considered increasing the original. Adding in more 15-year-olds or anything like that. I think partly because we haven't felt we've really had to, because the numbers are quite large, and it would be difficult to see. I think it would be difficult to do pairing as well, because it would be difficult to match. I'm not quite sure how we would find a group that was sort of similar that would then contribute without distorting the group that we originally had. I'm not quite sure how we would do it, but we haven't anyway. So the answer is that we haven't done that. Did you have another question at the end, though? Did you say something else?
Yes,
Nutrition.
just to complement into that. So DFID gave us funding for 15 years for the first 5 rounds. So since the beginning, we knew that we were going to be able to do this. But it's true that over time we have had other founders, because other sources of funding to introduce a school survey, for instance, or to analyze the data. So, but DFID has been the main contributor. Yeah, it's true that we probably thought about this, but we actually didn't make it happen to increase the sample size. I guess in a way it has to do with the fact that our study is already very complex from a logistical point of view because of the high rates of internal migration, and I guess probably we didn't want to get into more troubles, to be honest. But I see your point. That would have been useful. In a way, when we think also about the future, because if you see a number, you realize that the younger cohort is larger. So eventually, we might need to reach a decision in which we no longer follow the older cohort, because the sample gets, even if the attrition rate is low, yet the sample gets also, the original sample was also small. So we might have to think about not tracking them at some point. Whereas in the case of a younger cohort, we think we will be able to do it for many more years. But it's true. I think we thought about it, but we need to obtain more funding, and also the complexity of the field work will have increased, and it's already complex, I have to say. About you also had a question about attrition and the reason for the attrition. We're working on this actually with a colleague in terms of understanding whether attrition is driven by observable characteristics, and that I hope is going to be released soon. But what I can tell you, especially for the specific case of Peru in particular, but I think it might apply to some extent to other countries, is that one important thing that you see is that the attrition rate is higher for the older cohort, and that you see that the larger increase in attrition rate happens from age 15 to age 19. So that's where it's not huge, the increase in attrition, but you see that it's more than what we used to have. Before it was very linear, the increase in the rate of attrition, and then it jumped between age 15 and age 19. That's between rounds 4 and 5. And between rounds 3 and 4, I'm sorry. And the reason in part to us, multiple. Migration is one of the reasons. So many of them completed the school and moved to the closest city to work. That doesn't mean we don't follow them. We follow them, but it is just for that fact. It is likely that we might have more problems in finding them. Yeah. Then also, I think by age 19, they are somehow. So one thing about the ethical approval is that between these 2 rounds they became adults officially. So we had to in the past we requested consent from the caregiver and from them. But starting from age 19, we only needed consent from them. And you probably feel more empowered. So it's totally up to me if I want to continue with this study. I might say no. I mean, and another thing connected with this age, with this increase in age, is that if you became independent, it means we need to ask you to answer the household questionnaire in addition to everything else. Because when you were age 15, living with your parents, the household questionnaire was answered by the caregiver. But if you're independent, no, not anymore. It's interesting to see, though, that the next round at age 22, we managed to convince some of the previous participants that sometimes not really decline to continue, but it's like when you knock at the door, Peruvians are probably very polite and they don't like to say no. So you knock at the door and they say yes, but come back tomorrow. And you knock at the door the next day, come back tomorrow, please. When you've done that 3 times, it's kind of a refusal, right? So you stop knocking at the door. But it's not that the person has said, I don't want to be part of this study anymore, because if they say that they don't want to be part of the study anymore, we that's fine, of course, and we don't try to trace them in the next round. But if it has been something like I don't know, a polite refusal, I don't know how to call it, then we knock at the door again. And it's interesting to see that by age 22, some of them wanted to come back. I think it has to do something with the fact that the age, you feel more empowered. You're like, I want to do something different. But then, like, these are my old friends from the Young Life Study knocking at the door again. I should probably open the door and talk to them.
Can I just add something? I mean, I would love to just say that it's true we didn't expand the sample, but we did add siblings data. I can't remember which round that was, which enabled us to do much more on intra-household dynamics than we've been able to do before. And the other thing I think, which is even more powerful, was the school effectiveness study, which we introduced in 2010, which basically came about because of policy interest and donor interest in the extraordinary effect of education and the incredible aspirations that this sample of children had towards education. So we got extra funding to do this, and we were basically doing school-based research, and that's actually over 30,000 children across the 4 study countries. So that really is much bigger than the household sample in total, and that's enabled in Peru in particular for us to make the link between the index child and the school that they're in. And perhaps, Alan, you can maybe say a bit of.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, actually, the previous question about using the older cohort as a comparison of the younger cohort or vice versa, and I was thinking about mentioning this, but now you have reminded me about the SIB. So we basically follow one child in each household, but for the rest of the children, we collect very basic information: sex, age, level of education, and time use, which is which is a lot actually. But since the 3rd round, we started collecting additional data for the younger sibling, so the sibling born right after the index child. And obviously, the reason why we did this was to kind of look for a natural counterfactual within the household. And actually, some of the studies that have been more successful in terms of the journal in which they have been published use within siblings variation to look at the impact of programs. In Peru, where typically both siblings have been affected, have received the program, but one starting from very earlier, one from later in life. So this sample, so actually, when I said that we follow 2,000 children in the younger cohort approximately, in fact, it's 2,700 or 800 maybe if you include the younger siblings. And for them, we collect the anthropometry and one cognitive test, and socio-emotional competences. So we can actually do that comparison. And just one, I think there was one question that I forgot to answer about the migration. our data is publicly available, and one thing you can clearly see there is we have some anonymized variable where you can see if the person has moved, and whether the person has moved but within the same district, but also if the person has moved to a different district. And there is also another information about whether the person still lives in an urban area or a rural area, and the name of the region and province. So if you combine all these, you can actually, and if you have a definition of what migration means in Peru, you can actually establish whether someone has migrated. And obviously you can, and also we have questions about, for those that have moved to a new district, about the reason why they did. So obviously, in many cases, it's searching for work opportunities, also for educational opportunities, and so you can use this information to look at what drives migration, and also because it's a longitudinal study, what are the impacts of migration on outcomes. There is in fact also a nice study by one member of our team, Javier Escobar. He's the former PI of the study, who looked before into the impact of the migration of the mother of the young life children and its impact on child outcomes. And for that in particular, in the case of Peru, in round 2, for those that are familiar with the data set, if you go to a round 2 data set, there is a model that measures the migration of the mother. So you can actually do that. I also have to say that we collect more information about migration, more specifically about the places, but because of the confidentiality agreement, we cannot release that data. But even with the publicly available version of the data set, there are many opportunities to analyze this topic, which I haven't actually done in my case because there are so many things to do. But some of you could do it, I should say.
Well, I have a question. And first of all, I should say that as we talk about attrition, the attrition rates of young lives are remarkably low. I mean, if you look at British-based cohorts, you'll often see up to 40% attrition rate over the same period. So it really is, congratulations to the team for that. We may be talking about what predicts attrition, but we're really talking about tiny numbers in relative to other studies. My question is about something which we have in all of our studies, which is a kick list. And the kick list is the list of questions that we wish we'd asked, but hadn't. And I wonder whether you had your own kick list, official or unofficial, and things that, particularly for other researchers who are considering working on or starting cohorts, things that you wish you had asked but didn't.
I don't know. I might have asked about pets earlier on in the study, but yeah.
You have to explain that, Mary.
Well, actually, this is not just me. Peru, and particularly Lima, is very keen on their pets, mainly dogs, almost exclusively dogs. And so it's not just me. And so we did introduce a question, but I can't remember what round we introduced it in, that did you have pets? And it would have been quite interesting. And we haven't fully analysed it yet, but we're working on getting some funding to analyse it from NIH. But it would have been quite interesting also. But that's a minor issue, really. I mean, it's just one thing that would be quite nice to know.
Dear to the British people's hearts.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, just as an example, this is a Lima example, but a very large number of families have dogs. But we don't just have a dog; we have a dog walker because we live in Peru, and somebody probably has to live in the house because you've got animals in the house. It's mainly dogs, not dogs. Some cats, maybe some guinea pigs, but mostly it's dogs. So people, it's an expenditure. And even in rural areas. But I'm not sure, rural areas I think are very different from, if you live in a rural area and there's a farm dog and things. But Lima, certainly, and not just middle class areas, Lima, shantytown areas, a lot of people do have pets. So, yeah, anyway, this is kind of like an aside, really, because it's not the most important aspect of young lives, but some of us think it's interesting. It's pretty complete, actually, but I haven't thought, oh my goodness, I wish we'd really asked that. I haven't thought of specific things. Perhaps you asked me another day, I'd remember something that I'd asked. I would have liked to have asked, but it hasn't been. Yeah.
But maybe one reason why Mary cannot come up with questions that she wished we had added is because of the design that we have this older cohort, the younger cohort, and this has been established like this in a way so that we have the chance to introduce questions for the older cohort first, and if there is anything to be modified or improved, then we have a few years so that by the time the younger cohort has arrived the same age, we actually have a very complete questionnaire by the time they have the same age. So I would say probably that we have some regrets about more about the older cohort, but not so much about the younger cohort, because we already had the chance to think about it for many years. For instance, I wish we had included the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test since the first round for the older cohort. Not for the younger cohort because they were too young. But, so this is not a regret for the younger cohort, but it is for the older cohort. I wish we had also included maybe a cognitive achievement test for the caregivers in the first visit. But, I see also that our questionnaires are so long already that I can see why there was a logic in keeping it as it was. I wish we had started with the siblings earlier. I wish we had started with them in round 2. But we learn over time. I remember with the siblings, because with the siblings we started only with anthropometrics and the cognitive information, but in the end, after we should also ask about socio-emotional competences from them. So there are some things that we could have done differently, and also I guess in terms of measuring early childhood development, I think many things have improved over time in terms of tools standardized to measure early childhood development that maybe were not available in round 1 in 2002, or maybe they were, but I'm very happy with the information we collected, but on that area of early childhood development, we could have collected more in round 1.
Or had an earlier round 1. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, actually, is initiation already at age 1. You've missed an awful lot, and obviously some birth cohorts are able to answer questions that we'll never be able to answer. And I think it's really important to remember that because we've entered the nutrition debate and made a very strong case for this argument that children can recover over time, and they don't just recover physically, but they also recover cognitively in terms of educational attainment. So people come straight back to us and say, well, which children are recovering? And we're not able to answer the questions about whether it's the children who were malnourished, maybe they weren't malnourished as long or as badly or as early as some of the other children, and maybe that's what's enabled them to recover. That, of course, is the most vital question. When you pose this new opportunity for recovery, people need to know that, because otherwise, what are they going to know? How is it going to help? So I get very frustrated that we weren't actually really gathering data from in utero, and also, much earlier from the first. I mean, there are many studies which do start in the first days of life. There were reasons why it was a good choice to make, but it's had that negative consequence, I think, in terms of the kind of answers we can provide. But we didn't know we were going to make this discovery, so we didn't know we were going to need to be able to answer those questions, which is your point.
Fantastic.